The Battle of Formigny was a major battle of the Hundred Years' War, fought in Normandy, in northern France, on April 15th, 1450, between the Kingdom of England and the Kingdom of France. By 1429, the Kingdom of France was reeling and teetering on the edge of defeat. They had suffered crushing battlefield defeats by the English at Agincourt in 1415 and Verneuil in 1424. And the alliance between England and the Duchy of Burgundy weakened the French position even more so. However, with the emergence of Joan of Arc at the Siege of Orleans in 1429, the tide began to turn against the English. Joan of Arc had a tremendous presence, and her appearance marked a revival of French spirit. Miraculously, the Siege of Orleans was lifted, and the retreating English army was then annihilated at the Battle of Patay. This stunning victory opened the way for the French Dauphin to march to Reims, where he was coronated as King Charles VII on July 16th, 1429. At this time, the King of England, Henry VI, was only 8 years old. As the only child and heir of King Henry V, he was also the youngest person ever to succeed to the English throne. Succeeding to the throne after his father's death in 1421, at the age of only 9 months old. During his youth, a regency government was established, which made decisions in the king's name. This government was led by his uncle, Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, Henry Beaufort, the Bishop of Winchester, and John, the Duke of Bedford, as well as many other important and influential figures of England. Before the arrival of Joan of Arc, this regency government's effective management of the war brought the English to the height of their power in France. The Duke of Bedford was particularly skilled as an administrator and soldier, and he was also the only key figure maintaining the English-Burgundian alliance. On September 14th, 1435, the Duke of Bedford died. Immediately after this, at the Congress of Arras in 1435, the Duke of Burgundy, Philip the Good, switched sides, making peace with and becoming allies with the King of France, Charles VII. This was a massive diplomatic failure by England. France was already allied with the Kingdom of Scotland, and this new alliance with Burgundy greatly strengthened their position even more. France was now unified, and England was left isolated. The end of the alliance with Burgundy marked a decline of English dominance in France. The French went on the offensive, employing a strategy focused on sieges while avoiding pitched battles. This strategy worked quite well, and the French were able to slowly recapture town after town. Long truces during the war gave King Charles time to centralize the French state and organize his army, replacing the feudal levies with more modern professional armies. He also recognized the importance of artillery, and France became a pioneer of gunpowder weapons during this time. Under the leadership of French artillery commander Jean Bureau and his brother Gaspard, the French cannons had a great impact, aiding the French in the sieges of Montereau in 1437, Meaux in 1439, Saint-Germain-en-Laye in 1440, and Pontoise in 1441. This was a major technological turning point. A castle that once could only be captured with traditional machinery after a prolonged siege would now fall after only a few days from cannon bombardment. Bureau's efforts would make French artillery the most effective in the world. The English employed their own artillery also, but they lagged behind the French in terms of numbers deployed and overall effectiveness. The war continued until the Treaty of Tours in 1444 again brought the hostilities to an end temporarily. In this truce, Henry agreed to marry Charles's niece, Margaret of Anjou. Henry hoped the treaty was a step towards a lasting peace, while Charles intended to use it solely for military advantage. Still determined to drive the English from France, the truce allowed the French valuable time to reorganize and reinvigorate their military forces. When the truce expired, after the French position had improved, France went on the offensive once again, and in June of 1449, the war continued. By January of 1450, the French had already retaken many territories of Normandy, conquering Rouen, Pont-Audemer, Pont-à-l'Évêque, Lisieux, Harfleur, Honfleur, and Fresnoy, before moving on to Seine. Determined to protect the remaining Norman territories, an English army of around 3,000 reinforcements, led by Sir Thomas Kyriel, made landfall in Cherbourg on March 15th. Upon landing, Kyriel's army was further reinforced by Edmund Beaufort, the Duke of Somerset, and Lieutenant General of Normandy, with additional forces drawn from the local garrisons of Bayeux, Seine, and Vire. Reinforcements from Bayeux were led by Sir Matthew Gough, a veteran Welsh soldier who fought the French previously at the battles of Crevant in 1423 and Verneuil in 1424. Sir Robert de Vere led the English reinforcements from Seine. Robert was the second son of Richard de Vere, the 11th Earl of Oxford. Knighted in 1426, he was the captain of Seine, and he was appointed to the office of Seneschal of Gascony in 1441. Lastly, English reinforcements from Vire were led by Henry Norbury, another English veteran commander and nobleman who fought the French previously at Rouen in 1436. Kyriel advanced south, laying siege to Valognes. After a short siege, the settlement fell on March 27th, and Kyriel continued his advance towards French-held Carentan. When the English army reached Carentan on April 12th, there were a number of small skirmishes, but the French declined to sally forth. Kyriel then turned to Bayeux, reaching the village of Formigny on the 14th of April, 1450. Meanwhile, a French army under the command of Jean, the Duke of Bourbon, and the Count of Clermont advanced east from Carentan, intending to intercept and destroy the English force. Jean de Bourbon was a man with a respectable and fearsome reputation. He was also known by the name John the Good, and, because of his military success, the scourge of the English. At the same time, a force of around 2,000 Breton cavalry, under the command of Arthur de Richemont, the Duke of Brittany, advanced towards the English also, reaching Saint-Lô from the south by the 14th of April. Arthur was a seasoned military commander. He fought the English previously at the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, where he was wounded and captured. He also served as Constable of France and campaigned alongside Joan of Arc during the victory at Patay in 1429. The next day, on April 15th, Clermont's forces were sighted by the English, and the two armies faced each other on the road between Carentan and Bayeux, near a small stream, and prepared for battle. The English positioned their army with their backs facing a shallow stream. The English army numbered around 4,000 to 5,000 men strong, consisting mostly of dismounted men-at-arms and longbowmen. They gathered in a long line behind a thicket of anti-cavalry wooden stakes and low earthworks. The English and French men-at-arms were both heavily armored in thick plate. The battle began in the afternoon of April 15th. Clermont ordered his men to attack, and the French opened the engagement with an assault by dismounted French men-at-arms on the English position, supported by French cavalry charges on the English flanks.
Avant!
These opening assaults by the French were defeated, and the English held the line. Unable to break the English defensive formation, Clermont ordered his infantry to temporarily withdraw. He then deployed his heavy artillery. 2 culverins opened fire on the English, and the English defenders began to take heavy casualties from the cannon fire. Unable to withstand the artillery fire, Curiel now had no choice but to go on the offensive and abandon his defensive position. Curiel quickly ordered his men to attack, and the English army assaulted the French position, capturing the French guns. The English assault was successful. Now, with the French guns having been silenced, the French army was in disarray and on the verge of total defeat. It was in this moment, when the battle seemed lost, the Breton cavalry under Arthur de Richmond finally arrived from the south. After crossing the river Our, they approached the English force from the flank. The English commander, Curiel, quickly ordered some of his men to shift south and face the new threat. Clermont, seeing the Breton cavalry had finally arrived, ordered the main French army to attack again. And the Duke of Brittany ordered his cavalry to charge the enemy. The Breton cavalry charge was very effective, and the English army was massacred. Sir Thomas Kyriel was captured, and his army destroyed. Sir Henry Norbury was also captured. Only a small force under Sir Matthew Gough and Robert de Vere was able to escape. Kyriel's army, initially numbering around 5,000 to 7,000, ceased to exist, with around 3,000 men being killed and 1,400 captured. The French and Breton casualties were comparatively light, losing less than 1,000 men. The destruction of the English army at Formigny left the remaining English territories in Normandy vulnerable, and the entire region quickly fell to the victorious Kingdom of France. Caen was captured on June 12th, and the last English-held fortress in Normandy, Cherbourg, was captured on August 12th. The Battle of Formigny was a major event, a stepping stone that succeeded in bringing France even closer to total victory in the 100 Years' War. Now that England had been driven from Normandy, in the years that followed, the French would now turn their focus to the south, targeting the territory of English-held Gascony. Subsequent campaigns resulted with the final defeat of the English at the Battle of Castillon in 1453.